it was because of certain mentors and professors. Otherwise I would have never, I mean, I never even dreamed, so.
Yeah. Cause we don't really know how to navigate it all.
Right.
I think
Exactly.
I got lucky that I got that far. And I think for me, like for instance, he noticed that I loved teaching residents and I really liked that. And so when the program director at that time had said, I'd like to tag her to be my assistant and eventually do my job, like he agreed. And like I was brought in and not just thrown the job, like to learn the job. So there was like this level of succession planning I really appreciated.
Oh, that's great. I need to plug in my computer, the battery, just a moment.
Do you mind if I grab just a drink of water?
No, sure, go ahead.
I left it in the kitchen. So sorry, I'm already in my pajamas.
Oh, no worries. Yes, I'm glad you're comfortable. So, yeah. So just to get to know you, why did you want to become a doctor in the first place?
I wish I had a great story. I actually wanted to be a psychologist. And so I went and got my undergrad in psychology. And, not only was I first generation, my dad was enlisted. So I had to work in college. So I cleaned bathrooms on the weekends, which I did all the way through med school too. And I, worked in a lab because it paid. But when I was in this lab, the people I was with, they're all applying. It was a neuropsychology lab and everybody was applying to medical school and they're like, you should think about it. And I was like, oh, I don't think I'm smart enough. So I started taking the classes and I actually did really well in them.
Hey, good for you.
Yeah. So I think most people who graduated from my high school, they either got married or joined the military. And my high school counselor even told me, nothing against cosmetology, but that's what he told me I should do, that I wasn't college material. So,
proved him wrong.
He was wrong, but that's okay. So I think like for me, it was more of like, well, let's see if this class knocks me out of the running. And I just kept doing well. And then I applied and I got in, which was kind of surreal. But I think a lot of it is just when I was in high school, I lost a really close friend of mine who was, in the ICU for 4 days before he passed.
Wow.
And I think it's interesting because when I was a surgery intern doing a lot of trauma, I thought about him a lot. And I think in some ways, I think I wanted to walk with people during those moments.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Very moving.
But I didn't have a straight trajectory there. I think I figured that out later. Like, yeah.
It seems like that's the way life goes sometimes. Yeah.
It was like, it's a sacred relationship that I really, and it kind of then was like anesthesia was me advocating for somebody that I've rendered unconscious. And I felt very strongly about that role. So.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I can hear that. So did you do any anesthesiology where you're currently at before?
Yeah, I did. So I finished my OB anesthesia fellowship in 2009. And, I was diagnosed actually just a year later with MS. I didn't really have a lot of symptoms. I started getting them like January of 2010, but I was too busy. I didn't stop and like think, oh, I should go to the doctor, because the symptoms would usually go away. Like my left face would be a little numb, but then it would go away. My balance would be a little off, but I thought it was like some kind of inner ear thing. And around the time I'd go, oh, maybe I should go see my doctor. I just didn't, I don't know. I waited until I basically I was having some problems with my arm and my leg one day teaching in the OR, and it was like a late night, and I thought it was a pinched nerve. And then by the time I woke up the next morning, it was really heavy, and I could drag my leg, but I couldn't really take a step. And then I knew I needed to go to the emergency room.
Wow, that's very scary.
Yeah, I thought it was a brain tumor, honestly, or a stroke.
My.
I didn't, so in some ways MS was probably better, but I don't know.
So when was that? What year?
That was July 23rd of 2010.
Okay. So,
but I practiced as a faculty and for 2 years, because while I was a fellow, it wasn't accredited. I worked and I did my fellowship. So gosh, I was like, really? It was only a year, but it was really like 2 years, but.
So with the MS, how did that affect your training?
Well, I was done with training. So I was supervising at that time.
Or supervising. Yeah.
Yeah. And, so I never went back to clinical practice because, like I said, I was pretty hemiplegic. My deficits were really significant at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of, with MS, they don't know how much you're going to get back. So it was like, well, let's wait and see in 6 months and we'll reassess. We'll have a better idea what type you have. And then at 6 months, I wasn't any better. I was getting worse. Mm-hmm. And so the medication that I was on wasn't holding the disease. So I kept having these relapses, which just kind of was this continuous decline. For 2 years, I was walker, scooter, cane dependent. I went back to work at 6 months full time as actually not full time. It was very part time. I forgot, very, very part time, as a, administrator, just doing the residency program, which I had already been doing for 6 months before I went out. And then I think part of the issue for me was the medicine wasn't working, but the one that they wanted me to go on, 1 in 1,000 people were just dying and they weren't sure why. And I was 36 with a 3 and a 5-year-old. And I felt like I'd rather do the slow decline than the potential of death. So I made a conscious decision to do that. And then they came out with this antibody test that could tell you if you were going to be the 1 in 1,000. And I was JCE virus negative, so I could switch to it. And once I switched to that, it held the disease finally. And then I could rehab myself back, but I've never had full function. I got back a lot, but not enough to be safe to put in breathing tubes and procedures on patients. Never.
Okay. How did having MS affect your just your ability to even teach about caring for patients, or, to do administrative things, or in any aspect related to caring for patients? I mean, did it give you any new insights, or?
That was one thing I remember kind of being a little angry because my eyes were wide open. And even though I always gave great care to patients, me being able to care for patients, being a patient, was like this wonderful good that could have come from something that took so much away. Mm. But, I couldn't do that in the capacity that I did before. And I honestly, so I tried to do it, like work clinically, but not in the OR. And so like I went and I tried to find out what the post-op nurses did and I was trying to figure out the next part of it. And my chair, who was very supportive, I got blocked though by some senior anesthesiologists who wanted those jobs for people who were retiring. And so I kind of got blocked into like administration work, which was fine. But looking back, that's one thing I wish I would have fought a little harder, because once you give up your clinical presence, it's really hard for someone to give it back to you. And I don't think I was safe in the OR, but I was safe in lots of areas, but I just didn't know enough. And but for me, it allowed me to then have a greater impact because I was supervising residents. I was taking time to mentor them. I was taking time to increase our processes that we're doing. We did a really horrible job of recruiting underrepresented minorities. So I started changing the things I could change and making the residency. We went from recruiting not very well to recruiting amazingly in the 12 years that I did it. So I just found other places to impact medicine indirectly. I started to share my story at the medical school, and I think that was huge. The comments that I got from the students, especially because like I just published a study, 4.5% of students have disabilities.
Wow.
Well, here's a physician who's standing up and saying, I have a disability. And and I'm happy to help you navigate this. And I want it to be a welcoming environment. So I guess